Good morning and welcome to Office Hours. Great to have you here. As always, if you're watching on YouTube, you can find out more about what we do on officehours.global. Our first hour is always a general discussion of production and IT related topics and where we answer audience submitted questions. That means you're involved. So hopefully you'll know the process by now and how to get your questions in. That's really what drives our entire discussion. The second hour is typically a deeper dive into some specific topic. Today, we're talking about the talking camera, and it's an idea I had many years ago about how to decide whether or not you should change a shot once you start it. Sometimes videos, movies, and everything else are made with single shot by shot by shot. In fact, most movies are made that way. But occasionally you want to move the camera, do pans and tilts and dollies and things like that. And so we'll talk about a way I came up with to decide for myself whether or not a move is warranted. That's in the second hour. First hour, always just question and answer. So let's dive into that. Mitch, what do we got today?
Thank you, Bill. Our first question drops in from Andy Kokendorfer in Vieira, Florida. Andy asks, opinions on the THX AUX DAC. That's a digital audio converter. Is the THX worth the added coin when listening on headphones?
And since you've started, you get to continue, Mitch. It's up to you.
Here we go. THX on anything makes it better somehow. I'm not sure exactly how. In this particular question, I'm going to set some reference points here. Yes, to answer your question, it does make it better. THX AUX DAC. The THX part is using the THX AAA algorithm, which basically works on intermodulation distortion and crossover distortion. And the specs indicate 20 to 30 or 40 dB of improvement. So to answer the question directly, it does improve it with the added coin. This device is about $130 on Amazon, but to put it in perspective, I have another device that I use for monitoring with my headphones that uses the very same THX algorithm, and it costs $3,000 made by Benchmark Audio. So the question is, what is the difference in price for? I think it's all up to the perception of the listener. But there's some people out there that really enjoy their headphone experience versus a near field or a room experience listening to sound. And the THX sort of sprinkles some pixie dust on all of it to make it better.
And Courtney has some thoughts.
Well, I was just going to show a picture of it. That's the THX Onyx DAC, and it's sorry about that. And it's $129 on Amazon. It's just kind of a dongle. It plugs into USB, but and it's I've always pronounced it Onyx instead of Onx, but that's just me.
I had an Onyx ring once as a young man, so maybe that has something to do with.
Maybe it sounds like Onx once it comes out of your headphones through the D.
I'm just glad they didn't name it Model 1138. That would have been way too confusing. Let's move on to the next question.
Next question is from Paul Terry, Wallace in Austin, Texas. In office hours, what is the commitment of the panelists to research and find answers to producers' questions if they don't know the answers? For example, by using Google and whatever search tools they have, or calling their lifelines.
I sometimes wish I had a lifeline on the show. That would be awesome. Let's start with Courtney for the discussion of this.
Well, Paul, I just proved that by showing you the THX Onyx that I looked up online and got a price for during the last question.
There you go, Mitchell.
And I just proved it by checking whether or not Courtney was right on spelling it, pronouncing it Onyx versus Onx. And Courtney is correct, according to Google. But all kidding aside, yeah, we're kind of very generalist as a panelist in answering these questions. We may have some either direct or tangential knowledge of the question, and we do our best to answer it. Occasionally, we try to fortify our memories with a little trip to Google, but for the most part, we should be answering these questions based on our experience and our expertise.
Chris Fenwick.
I totally agree. If it was just a matter of looking up stuff on Google and regurgitating stuff, then we just become an analog Google, and that's kind of dumb. What I always find the most interesting about the discussions that happen here is the tangential.
Tangential.
You're right. Tangential.
Thank you.
You're
the
perfect.
edge stuff and the way things interact. this is the ultimate, nerd Google, nerd water cooler, and to be able to discuss things and see how things interact is super interesting. That's I think my favorite part of office hours.
And Harshid.
This place to me is a learning place. So even to be on the panel, I keep engaged to the questions, even though they might not be in my ballpark, so to speak. So going to go research something for a question specifically does take away from you being engaged in the show or being a panelist. So I kind of refer to, let's listen to the question. If you know how to explain it, you could also go back and research it and then provide information in after hours, as like I usually do, in case if that's something really important that someone wants to know.
And Peter Sargent. Oh, I'm sorry. Mitchell's in between. Mitchell?
That's quite all right. This is a good example. The previous question where we were talking about a specific device, which I have no knowledge of, other than it was quoting that it had THX in it. That was the Onyx device that Courtney has corrected me on pronouncing. And I had to check in with Google to see exactly what the specs were, and that's when I found out that using the very good THX AAA algorithm, and I was able to talk to that because I have that in my system. But without Google, I wouldn't have known that detail about that device, which I have no knowledge of.
Peter, want to sneak in?
Well, this clearly points out some of the comments that Alex makes every once in a while, which is if the questions come in early enough, we as panelists can start researching them ahead of time if we need to do some research and get something queued up. And the other thing is, I think in our various areas that we know something about, Mitch just expressed one. He understands the value of THX and the sound algorithms. I'll take in chip design, but I know how to ask the question of Google if I'm unsure of the exact wording or the exact answer. I know how to ask the question of Google, which is an important skill in its own right.
Yeah, I resonate with what everybody said here. I know for myself, it just depends. If I'm doing something active in the show, I have very little time to research. So if I'm the questioner, if I'm reading questions, if I'm hosting or whatever, I have almost no time to research things. Occasionally before the show, if a question comes in early enough and I think I really know something about it, I'll try to make sure that my knowledge, my memory is accurate. The things, and we all have, there's areas that we can feel reasonably expert in because we've done them for most of our career and we really understand that. There are things that we are familiar with from being around the industry for a long time. We may not be experts in that, but we can probably have a reasonable opinion. And then there are things on the periphery. And I personally, I just try to stay away from topics that I'm on the periphery of. The only exception to that is occasionally we'll get very few questions. And we know that the show needs to continue to run. And I want to make sure that everybody who puts in a question has at least a shot at getting some sort of a useful answer out of it. So I may go a little beyond my area of true expertise to try to help somebody because they're coming here for help. That's my impression. And we'd like to do at least something for them. Okay, that's too much talk. Let's go on to the next question.
Next question is popping in from Douglas Carmichael. The latest Mix Effect release offers multi-view display and switching right from your iPad. There's a link to it. Not having switched more complex show before, when would a hardware panel be more suited to an event?
Well, I think that anybody who does switching a lot probably prefers hardware to doing all their switching in software. Although now that software switching is so prevalent, that may be changing a little bit. Mitchell, you had some thoughts on this.
Yes, the thing of it is that most of us would prefer a tactile button, particularly if we're doing something quickly, because if you have an iPad, you can't just reach over and start smacking away at it and hitting touch buttons in the right order or procedure. A tactile button is going to give you a much more better location and ability to switch things. My muting button is like that because I like having tactile buttons instead of mousing around to mute and unmute my microphone. So I say a hardware device, check.
Yeah, there's also I think the piano player idea, which is even though you have 88 keys on a piano, a pianist who has studied and practiced knows exactly where their hands need to go instantly without looking or thinking about it. I think hardware does encourage that. Chris Fenwick had some thoughts on this.
Yeah, I mean, the real key to this question, I think, is the multi-viewer. the fact that the multi-viewer is in the software is amazing to me. I don't know how Andy is doing that, but I can't imagine there isn't some sort of a delay. And back when I used to switch live shows, I can remember being like literally yelled at by directors because I would be like, 2 frames after the call. I had a director once tell me, you're pressing the button on the T of take. Can you press it on the K instead? So the amount of delay that I think it could be a problem. For general easygoing stuff, I'm sure it's great.
There you go. So that gives you an insight into the mind of somebody who does switching at a high level. They are kind of musicians in their own way. Rhythm is as important as anything else to making a show really sing. Let's move on to the next question.
Paul Terry Wallace in Austin, Texas asked, Descript lets you edit video with artificial intelligence voiceover. You can remove words like, globally. Does that put traditional video editing on the sidelines?
No, let's start with Courtney.
Well, I wouldn't think so. I haven't used Descript, so I don't know how intelligent its artificial intelligence is. When you edit something like an interview, you frequently want to cut to the other person listening while the person is answering the question, right in the middle of their answer, just to shake it up a little bit to keep it interesting. So I don't know if it's built with that kind of intelligence. So I would have to see. I would think I hate editors who just cut on the dialogue. In other words, this person speaks, we cut to them. That person speaks, we cut to them. That person speaks, we cut to them. They argue with each other, we cut to a 2-shot. And cutting on the beginning of the line, I don't like that at all. So I'm not sure how much intelligence was mixed in, but I think it would lead to a kind of a mechanical edit, which would be uninteresting to me and annoying.
Mitchell.
Paul, sorry, haven't had a chance to try it out. I'm very interested in how it deals with 2 people talking at once, one doing the other person actually answering a question. The other thing that would be a tough thing is if they're saying, and the word is pink, that would be an easy edit. But if the word is pink, and they bridge right into the word, and the is part of the following word, I don't think any algorithm's going to take care of that.
Chris Fenwick.
Artificial intelligence doesn't exist, and it won't. And the reason I know this is, I've said this before, when I buy toilet paper on Amazon, I see ads for toilet paper in every web browser for the next week. Like, they should be able to figure that out. Until they figure that out, artificial intelligence doesn't exist. Also, the minute we start doing editing on computers, every editor will be, oh, wait, we've been doing editing on computers for 30 years. No. Anytime something gets automated or simplified, all it does is it takes the chaff off the bottom of the pyramid and it puts those people out of work. If you're afraid of your job being supplanted by some sort of technological advancement, then you need to be the very, very, very best at what it is that you do. I mean, ask, Bill and Mitch, they both do, and Courtney, probably. Courtney, you've done pro VOs, right? These are great VO people. I can open up a text document in my Mac and I can type in a paragraph and I can say speech, like read it. Does that put them out of work? No, it does not. So just be really good at what you do and you never have to worry about the computers taking over until they do.
Mitchell.
That is an excellent answer, Chris. And I guess I agree with you because it's true. But the
never thought you'd see the day, right, Mitch?
Yeah, never thought it would happen, but here it is, and it's a global moment. It's interesting because I would rather edit myself than have some kind of algorithm trying to figure out what I was doing, wasn't doing, because I have certain things. For example, I can spot my ums and breaths and things like that on a waveform pretty easily without having to listen to it. If an AI was going there and making interpretations about the proper timing, it's not that it just removes the or the breath or whatever. Does it maintain the timing of the read? The next sentence may come in too quickly or too late. There's a lot of stuff that goes on that takes the gray matter between your ears to properly make the edit to make it sound natural, because there's a tempo to it. I'm not sure those algorithms are up to that.
Courtney.
My bigger fear is that the AI algorithms in audio processing these days will have the ability to turn Pee Wee Herman into James Earl Jones or Morgan Freeman, and with a punch of a button. So, there goes the voiceover career.
I think there's a lot of context to this. I mean, there are certain times when I think a machine could do a decent job of doing some kinds of editing. And that is to say, often I'm editing, let's say, a large piece that's driven by narration. And I'm going to take out all the ums and ahs, because it's really a radio edit that I'm trying to achieve, the smooth flow of thoughts. And any or ah is just wasted time that we don't really need. There's the other kind of editing, though, and they cross over a lot, which is an aesthetic editing. And so let's say you have a dramatic piece, and the shot, a very important shot, is her walking away from him. And because we've told the story in flashbacks, this is the last time they're going to see each other, and you care about the characters. And so lingering on that shot as she walks away may be the perfect thing for the drama of this piece. And I certainly don't want an algorithm saying, wait, that's black space, cut it short so that she walks away and then we cut to the next shot. And that's completely against the aesthetic of a good editor making a decision on behalf of the audience. The audience needs time to process what they just saw. Let me give them some space here so they can do that. Mitch, you had a last thought?
Yeah, I agree, Bill. I think that makes a lot of sense. And if you'll allow me to have a Fenwick moment here, I'm afraid that if I let an AI edit my voiceover, that I may have to go back and fix it what the AI did, and that might take twice as long as the time I would have saved if I just let the AI do it and walk away. I would never let it make all those decisions. So AIs don't exist.
My name is Mitch. I am on office hours. Glad to meet you.
I think we've had Siri have an appearance here. Siri, do you have any other thoughts? No, that's dangerous. I'm not going to do that.
Please.
Yeah, there are a lot of nuances here. It can, automation. I remember when auto exposure and things like that came in, and we tried the first one and saying, it's not quite working so well. But then all of a sudden it got better and it was useful. And I can see circumstances where these things can help you, maybe in the way they sometimes do it now, which is let the auto algorithm give it a shot. You, as the editor, take a look at it, and you have to decide for yourself, should I start from where that did it? Because it did fix some things that I don't now have to spend my time fixing. Or, no, that's terrible. Let me hit the undo button and do it manually. They're tools. And if the tool can help you get your job done faster and more efficiently, great. But that should be up to the human editor to decide one way or another. It's never going to completely supplant it, in my mind. Next question.
Next question in from Andy Kokendorfer in Vieira, Florida. Any good headphone recommendations? I currently use the Sony 7506s, but I wonder if there's something better for editing. Thank you.
Straying into religious territory, but Mitch is going to start us off here.
9 out of 10 editors use the Sony 7506s. There may be better headphones out there. The question is, do you want to spend $2,000 to $3,000 for an esoteric headphone that one day you're going to take it and plug it into the wrong thing and boom, there goes your money?
Chris. Oh, I'm sorry, Courtney.
A little bit better than the 7506 was the 7509, now discontinued, replaced by the MDR 7510, which has a little bit larger diaphragm, 50 millimeter instead of 40 millimeter, which was the 7506. So you might try that. Give you a little bit better bass response for high def headphones.
Chris Fenwick.
I prefer the V6. It's the classic one. It was first released in the 80s. They tried to get rid of it in the 90s. There was a giant pushback in the pro sound community, and Sony actually brought it back. And then all those people retired, and they moved on to the 7506 series and all those. But this is an older pair of the MDR V6s, nearly impossible to find. Like really hard to find. If I had 2 or 3 more, I'd put them in the closet and wait for these to die. I've replaced these earmuffs 10 times probably.
Yeah, a lot of us are in that circumstance. Mitch, you had another thought?
Yeah, I can't let this go by. Only Chris Fenwick can make a conspiracy theory out of headphone selections.
Well, it's this is semi-religious here.
No. It's really true. I mean, you can. It's on the internet, so it must be true. But the story goes, they tried to replace them, and there was a total pushback in the pro sound community, and Sony brought them back. It's not a conspiracy theory; it's fact. Read it on the internet.
I'm going to weigh in on
conspirators think, Chris, just for what it's worth.
I'm going to weigh in on this as well. Some people value headphones for different things. Some people want full range accuracy, right? I want the rumble of the kettle drum to sound like there's a kettle drum next door to me, and I want everything else to be absolutely flat and accurate as if I was standing next to or in the midst of these musicians listening to them play. And that is a lovely thing to achieve. Other people do not want that, and I am one of them. I have been with Sony 7506s for probably 25 years now, and the reason is, to my ears, they have a pronounced peak in the upper mid-range, which is centered right around where human speech is. 99% of the time that I'm using headphones, particularly in the field, I'm monitoring dialogue, and it is mission critical for me to hear problems with that dialogue. If an actor, actress, somebody out there, or even just a mic is messing with my ability to hear a splashy S or a fluffed T in dialogue delivery, I can get back and have to fix a problem that I didn't hear in the field. So I love the fact that they are speech-friendly headphones. Their EQ curve is very speech-friendly. So I will constantly use them. You also get to know your headphones. Listening hours and hours and weeks and days, you can start to understand how your transducers in your listening system have different things. You might remember that when I started here, and for many years, I would put on my 7506s to do the mic checks. And then over time, as I started using this particular IFB system, my brain started understanding how to listen a little differently, so I could hear problems in the low end that this doesn't have. I could just, when I hear something, I know that that's a problem. And so I've been able to now do that monitoring on this system, but it took me 6-8 months to get used to the sound of these so I could do that. So I do think you get used to headphones too. Both Courtney and Mitch are going to sneak back in on this. So Courtney, start us off here.
Yes, Chris, look, a pair of MDR V6s. I have 3 of them, but I will point out.
New in box?
Not new in box, heavily used, earpads replaced at least 3 times.
Get an alarm system. You said that on the air. There are going to be people trying to steal them, I think.
But look at the chart here of the difference between the V6 and the 7506. The V6 on the left here, exactly the same diameter, exactly the same impedance, 63 ohms. Exactly the same sensitivity, exactly the same power handling capability. The only difference is the nickel-plated stereo plug
That's what does
versus
it.
the gold-plated stereo
That's what does
plug. It. So, that's the only difference according to Sony.
So you a nickel guy or a gold guy? That's fabulous. I've enjoyed this message. Mitch, you're going to bring us home on the headphone discussion.
I just want to point out your V6s say professional on them like my 7506s do.
Yeah, well, there you go. You've got an extra sticker.
You got it. It's got to be better.
Yeah. All right. Well, this was fun. The answer, I think, is, I'm not sure better headphones are going to make you a better editor or a better listener or whatever. Just, get used to what you're using. And if you find something you like, stick with them. What I wouldn't do probably is change and put a different set of headphones on every time I'm doing something different, unless I want these really flat, accurate, perfect, fabulous, expensive headphones for listening to, classical violin repertory at home. I respect that. And then you use your work headphones as work stuff. Anyway, let's move on. We've been here long enough.
Moving on, Paul Terry Wallace from Austin, Texas says, on the Insta360 link, what is the difference between slow and fast tracking, auto tracking, and AI zoom, HDR versus 4K?
And Courtney Gooden, as a Insta360 owner, will help us with this. Courtney?
I did, and I was hoping to demonstrate it today, but right as I was trying to get on into the panel this morning, something brought down my computer, and I have a sneaky suspicion it was the Insta360 drivers. So I'm afraid to plug it in again during the show to show you the difference between slow and fast tracking. I did try it out, and the fast tracking, if I moved slow, you'd move and then it would move, and you'd move and then it would move. Fast tracking, it could keep up with you as you moved around pretty fast, but it's a little bit jarring because it's so fast, and it comes to a stop very quickly if you stop very quickly. So it's not as you don't have a smooth in and a smooth out of the gimbal moves. AI zoom. I have not found the AI zoom yet. I didn't know that was a thing. Maybe that's a setting I haven't located yet. I found the artificial, the manual zoom, and the way to, if this is what you're calling this is how you zoom in. It recognizes the gesture. This puts it into auto tracking. Luckily, I don't have it turned on. I'm not using it at the moment. This puts it into zoom. You got to go loser. And then when you go up, it zooms in. And when you go down, it zooms out. A better AI gesture, I thought, would be like this, where you could go like, this and show it the frame that you wanted. Would be a better zoom.
I think on camera, that loser becomes Joker because your thumb's pointed the wrong way.
Yeah.
Just
if you use both of them, you're framing, you see, just like a director does. The camera starts close on our ingenue and it pulls back. It's the typical rangefinder gesture. But I haven't found the zoom. The easiest zoom I found is either pinch zoom, which works if you have a touchpad. You can kind of zoom in as long as you have the control open. And there's another problem with that. Because if you have the control open with the image in it, you can't be fitting that image to anything else other than the control itself. So on Windows, that's a problem. On a Mac, it's different.
Courtney, is the sensor 4K or HDR?
It's a 4K. It's a 4K sensor, and I switched between 4K and 1080p, and I couldn't tell the difference. But so maybe it's scaling down to 1080p, and so I didn't see the difference then.
And does it have HDR? And have you tried it in that mode?
It does have HDR, and everything got a little bit washed out. I kind of like if you're going in as a as a webcam, since everything that comes in as a webcam gets stomped on by Windows and by the all the software by crushing the blacks and trying to make you look, and by the artificial make my image look better in Zoom checkbox. When you go to HDR, it doesn't understand that. And it just gets kind of milkier and washed out a little bit, in my opinion. So I turned it off.
Interesting. All right. Well, hopefully that was enough to take care of things, Paul. And let's move on to the next question.
Greg Gibson in Washington, D.C. Sony FR7 shipped on Monday. Any early adopters?
Mitchell, you know Sony pretty well. Have you heard anything?
I'm the Sony boy, fanboy. Anyhow, my friend who runs a rental house in Philadelphia says that they bought a bunch and they're already getting many requests for it. So I guess that is the best early adopter knowledge that I can give you. But as Alex has said, we expect these handheld zoom cameras to be the next big thing.
Nice. Okay. Well, keep us up to date and we will keep coming back for more information. Next question.
From Dan Huber in Erie, Pennsylvania, is the Rode Go dual wireless still a good choice for small remote kits and might be used with just an iPhone in a rig or into a laptop with a camera on a tripod?
Courtney's going to help us out here.
I looked at both of those and chose the DJI mic, which is very similar to the Rode Go in function. They're both 2.4 gigahertz, two little transmitters and one receiver that sits on top of your camera and has an output either over a mini phone plug, 3.5 millimeter plug, or via USB as a device. And but I liked the DJI has more features in it, and it'll also record locally. I don't know if the Rode Go will. I don't think they can. And you can turn the local recording on and off inside each of the transmitters. The transmitters are smaller and a little more compact. They're narrower and aren't as obtrusive as the Rode Go's are. So I'd stay, and they're about the same price. So I'd go with the DJI over the Rode Go.
There you go. Next question.
Next one in from me, and my question is, what's the worst CAPTCHA you've endured on your way to a secure website?
I'm sad to say I may have been responsible for this question this morning. Mitch, go ahead. Tell us what's going on.
You are indeed, Bill. You brought it up. Now we have to suffer through the results. And these CAPTCHA things, sometimes they're easy. You know, click all the images that have a car in them, no problem. But I got one time that said, click all the images that have a turnaround in them. I'm like, turnaround? I mean, that's not even a typical phrase we use here. Maybe that is somewhere else. I know what a turnaround is for a XLR cable, so I didn't see any XLR cables. Anyhow, I was dumbfounded and I had to redo it.
Courtney?
Yeah, turnaround's another name for a gender changer. And if they showed pictures, you know, you'd have to question each person in the shot if you're going to answer that question. But my worst one is find the palm trees. And they have all these shots of California. There's a palm tree in almost every shot. Got to look way in the background. There's a little bitty palm tree on the horizon. Yeah.
Any palm
I get it
trees
wrong
in the Hollywood
every
sign
time.
shot.
Yeah.
I did cause this morning because I was trying to pop up something on my phone and I got into CAPTCHA hell, which is to say that it kept asking me, and now how about this? Mostly it was show me every square that has a crosswalk in it. And there were just so many weird options. And sometimes it was like everything on the bottom would be one big crosswalk, but then there would be these tiny things and you're squinting and going, is that white thing in the background a crosswalk? And do they want me to know that or not? And so it's hard. I came to the resolution or the resolve that on a laptop or a big screen, captures can be pretty easy to go through. Once you get into an iPhone or something small, these same grids can be very difficult. And I think it put me through 9 rounds of CAPTCHA before it allowed me to get in and do what I needed to do, which was extraordinarily frustrating. So
did it start asking for palm trees in a crosswalk?
That would have been even worse. I understand why they do it, but it drives me nuts. Next question.
From Vic Hernandez in Springfield, Missouri. What would you think about having a designated office hours time lord? Responsibilities would be making sure all posted times are accurate for their local time zone. For example, the daily email refers to U.S. daylight time when they're in standard time.
I would be a plus on that, but the question is, do you get a uniform? If we're going to make somebody a time loader, I think we should have them have a uniform, something that looks like a really good Park Avenue doorman.
Or a badge. They need
a badge, yeah. A cap, something, some sort of designator. Mitch Hill.
First of all, it's a timey-wimey thing, so good luck with that.
I don't know if that's in our future or not, but it's an excellent question. So keep bringing it up until someone gives you a responsible answer. Let's go to the next question.
David Brady in New York, New York. Japanese telecom, KDDI, announced that they will start using Starlink to provide service to all customers. Are they putting too many eggs in the one basket? There's a link to the one basket.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. There you go. Peter Sargent has raised his hand. Peter? Whoops, you're muted, Peter.
So actually, if you dig down into it, what they're doing is providing it to commercial and government customers in remote locations. And it's just the way they can get service to remote locations. They haven't said to all customers. That would be, I would find that amazing considering that the Japanese telephone company would be supplanting all of their service with Starlink.
Interesting. Courtney?
Well, since most phone companies can provide you with voice over IP, I would think it would be an easy thing to offer, since the Starlink is an IP connection over the internet, to offer voice over IP through a Starlink connections to the places where they haven't run any wires or any type of cable connection to the internet.
Given how much fiber is underneath the streets in major cities in Japan and along the railroad tracks, it's really remote locations.
I don't know. It's interesting. Mr. Musk has so many things going on right now that are gigantic initiatives that I'm a little leery of putting my business stuff, but that's just me. And maybe he has the bandwidth to run all these massive things. I wouldn't wait for a tunnel to come through with a boring company, though, because I think he's otherwise engaged. And at some point, how many giant businesses can any human manage effectively? But who knows? Maybe he has the right lieutenant crew and can do it. Let's move on to the next question.
Chris Widener from Lafayette, Indiana asks, Google begins refunding Stadia hardware purchases made on the Google Store. Is there anything anyone is aware of to use this hardware after Google shuts down the system completely?
John Preto's going to help us with this.
I'm just being informed by our producers that they're refunding the software, but not the hardware purchases. So I'm not sure what's going to happen to your hardware there, Mr. Widener.
It's sad to see these things come through, have a big splash in PR, and then kind of go away. And it seems to be happening quite often these days. So buyer beware always. Let's go on to the next question.
Our local gear guru, Paul Terry Wallace in Austin, Texas, asked, the THX Onx DAC is really cool if you have a phone and some headphones. Is there a similar product that is a headphone and microphone and keeps the phone charged up and is office hours quality?
Boy, you're asking for quite a few things there. I don't know of any. I do know that there are other similar little dongles for iPhones. I was trying to think of who makes there's a venerable old company in audio stuff that has a very good little audio interface for Lightning that has a digital audio DAC in line with the cord, but I can't think of its name right now. Yeah, I'm spacing on it, so sorry about that. But I guess come back another time, Paul. Maybe I think Alex does a good little bit with that. So next time he's on the show here, maybe ask and he might have an answer for you. Let's move on to the next question.
Scott Halver from Winston-Salem, North Carolina. Is there any advantage in using Blackburst as a reference with Blackmagic Pocket Cinema Camera 6Ks, no reference input, ATEM Constellation 1 MEHD bidirectional SDI HDMI converters, a hyperdeck, and a partridge in a pear tree?
Mitch, you were going to start us off, so go ahead.
I will try. There's no point in trying to stick a reference input onto something that doesn't have it. But reference even a Blackburst is better than nothing because it tends to allow all the devices to be in synchronous so that when you're switching between them, the screen doesn't flip.
Courtney Gooden.
Yeah, what Mitch said. If it doesn't have a reference input, then you can't use Blackburst or tri-level sync. Tri-level sync is the other thing that's used since we went to high def as a reference signal. Although if you can pretty much use any stable SDI signal that's of the same resolution as the camera as a reference signal. It doesn't necessarily have to be tri-level sync or Blackburst. So you can use that if you don't have a sync generator. But the idea behind a Blackburst generator is you have a common clock that you're distributing to everyone. So everyone slaves themselves to that common clock. And as a result, all the horizontal and vertical lines are in sync with each other. The horizontal lines and the vertical frames are in sync with each other. So when you cut, it doesn't have to renegotiate and retime the signal in and buffer a frame. So you don't lose a frame when you're switching between things.
Yeah, I think Courtney explained it very well. In the old days of analog television broadcast, if your sync got out, you'd see this little wide band kind of travel up the screen over and over again. And that is called the vertical interval. And it's the area from the first pulse of the signal down through all the data things. And then the picture starts and goes on. We don't see that very much anymore. And I've never seen it on a phone or anything because most of the sync is digitally controlled. But Courtney explained it well. Starting on the right timing is critically important, particularly for mixing signals together. So at some point you have to synchronize two signals coming in if you're going to do dissolves and other effects on two channels of video. Let's move on to the next thing.
And it's from Brian Carney in Wheaton, Illinois. Looking for a good footage stabilizer plugin I can use in Premiere and be able to adjust the clip speed at the same time.
Mitchell has some thoughts.
Two different things. You couldn't use one plugin unless it's designed to do that. But for example, with Sony cameras now, it used to be that you would take the footage in with the metadata, put it in Sony Catalyst, and then export the stabilization data that you could then bring into Premiere. Now there's a plugin made by Sony that does all of that from the metadata directly in Premiere. So I got your stabilizer part covered. As far as speed, there are time remapping software that can do that within Premiere also.
Yeah, I think all the major NLEs do these things. Just remember that if you're stabilizing footage, the amount of shake that you're trying to get rid of, the more shake there is, the only way you can really stabilize that footage is to blow it up so that if you have a jerk to the left and normally the boundary on the left side would slip over, if you blow the picture up enough, you can eventually get the whole thing full of pixels. Well, that means the more shake there is, the more it's going to have to expand that initial footage, and it can often look pretty lousy. So the key is to shoot things as stable as you can. This, I think, why all these little gimbals and things like that are so popular. It really takes footage that could have been really difficult to stabilize. And even if it's not perfect, it'll get you so close with a stabilizer, sometimes good enough to use. But even if not, a stabilization algorithm on it will not have to expand it very much to be able to process it afterwards. Courtney, and then Mitch will have some more thoughts. Courtney?
Yeah, you probably won't find anything that does both at the same time because one has to be done before the other. You have to time stretch first and then stabilize, because time stretching adds or removes frames, and stabilization looks at the difference between one frame and the next frame and which direction the pixels moved. So if it doesn't know that you're going to be adding frames, I think you would have to stretch the time first and then apply the stabilization.
Perfect sense. Mitch?
Just so you know, you have the option in the Sony cameras that process that Bill was describing of changing by zooming in or punching in a little bit on a 4K image actually can be done if the sensor is over or under sampled inside the camera. It can do some of that stabilization and still output a 4K image without doing something digitally to it. So just to give you a heads up. And that's why the metadata that goes with that shoot is important, because it's telling the software, I did this, this, and this. Maybe you can do a better job.
Yeah, Mitch is exactly right. And one of the things why the cameras that have higher rasters, the Blackmagic 6Ks, and there's 12Ks and other things out there, are highly prized because it gives you so many pixels to work with that image stabilization becomes easier if you're just trying to output a standard 4K picture inside a 6K sensor. You got a lot of room to work with. Courtney, no last thought?
Yeah, just Mitch brought up in-camera stabilization, but for good cameras that have good lenses and large sensors, a lot of that is OIS, optical image stabilization, which actually has little motors in the lens that move the elements of the lens to stabilize it as you're shooting. The cheaper cameras like a GoPro that don't have that many movable lens elements in them use electronic image stabilization, which we were talking about earlier, where it blows up the image and then moves the image around within that 4K.
Yeah, so there's a lot of technology there. Hopefully you'll find something, but in Premiere, you're going to have tools to be able to do a lot of it there. So good luck, and hopefully it works to your satisfaction. Let's go to the next question.
Sarah Doyle in Falls Church, Virginia. 'Tis the season on our production crew holiday gifts. What catches your eye to gift to your on-site production teams?
Oh, Mitchell, you have some thoughts?
Cash. Works great.
Well, it's the universal gift. There's also a lot of tools that I think people, depending on your budgets, I've always been surprised. In the original days, there's companies out there that do tchotchkes, do giveaways, gift. There's major companies that all their business is about is employee gifts. It used to be that they were all pretty cheap and kind of disposable, but lately I've seen more and more decent things in there. You can find things like Leatherman and phone holsters and all sorts of things that are actually useful. If nothing else, the traditional water bottle or water cup. There's a lot of things. So it depends on the level you're looking for. But there certainly are plenty of sites out there that are dedicated to doing nothing but imprinting of giveaways for corporate. I think people love those little things. We just call it swag in general. The things that you get as you go to a trade show that are given to you, then hopefully you find some use in your life after that. Courtney, you had a thought before we finish?
Yeah, I've got a lot of Dexter knives in my collection here. I would get every year.
Is that a little too on point for that show? Not to make another.
Oh,
sorry. Couldn't resist. Let's go on to the next question.
I don't know if I can. Another question in from Chris Widener in Lafayette, Indiana. A product blurb has a new feature, ASP Ardent Streaming Protocol, a smarter protocol that sends your stream data to our cloud to fully protect against quality loss, like buffering, frame drops, or glitches from the network fluctuations. Seems improbable.
And I don't know if anybody knows the ASP Ardent Streaming Protocol well enough on this panel to have an opinion on this. Nobody has weighed in. So this may be one of their our swing and a misses today. If so, Chris, please hold on to your question. Oh, Chris Fenwick will take a shot at it here. Chris?
I know nothing. I know nothing about this product. But Chris, I will say this to you. I think one of the things that we do often in our industry is we read into something. So we read features of a product, and in our mind, we're thinking, I really hope it does this. And so then we read that description again, and somewhere in our mind, we put features into products that don't actually exist. And we do that so that we have a justification to buy something that isn't going to work. And I see people do this often. I do it myself. I'm like, well, if it does this, this, and this, then it must do this. And the must do this feature is the one I really want it to do. But keep in mind, if it actually worked, they would probably say it. And the real problem is, even if it doesn't work, quite often they say it. I've gotten to the point, old curmudgeon guy, I don't believe anything until I actually see it work.
There you go. Voice of experience, because I've been in the same circumstance Chris just described. Let's move on to the next question.
Chad Lafarge in Columbia, Missouri asks, Reality Scan was released this morning after an 8-month beta. Any chances of a lab by those panelists who've been able to beta?
Nobody has weighed in on this one either. Chad, sorry, your reality scan. The problem here is we do this in real time, and most of us are getting ready for the show. So if something was released this morning, few of us have probably have time to even know that it exists, let alone have any experience using it. But with an 8-month beta, I can see why you're asking the question, Chad, and that makes perfectly good sense. Maybe somebody on any average panel might be well enough connected to have heard about it, to know somebody who is on the beta team or something like that and would have some initial day opinions. Sadly, today it doesn't look like it. So give it a couple of days, come back, ask the question again, and I'm sure by then somebody here on our crew will know enough about it to have an opinion. Next question.
From Chris Fenwick from Emeryville, California, and right here on our panel. Since we don't all have a brother who's a Steadicam operator, let's take a look at this great behind-the-scenes clip from The Star is Born.
So, Chris, you've been talking about that this morning in the pre-show. So give us a background.
It's super interesting. I just stumbled across this thing last night. If anybody knows the movie, it's from about, 4 or 5 years ago. Lady Gaga and Bradley Cooper, and they sing this song. Now, in the movie, it's all shot very close up. This Image Factory Productions, they put together this BTS clip of actually shooting of the scene. And it's super fascinating because there's a handheld guy, there's a Steadicam guy, and you get to watch them from the wide angle work. And I'm not going to play the music for copyright stuff, but it's really, really interesting. If you want to go watch this, I put the link in the Mukana. I guess I could put it in the chat, whatever. I'm sure you could find it. It's called alternate editing with different takes. Also, as an editor, Bill, Mitch, you'd probably notice this. If you watch it, you'll notice that this compilation reel here is from different takes of the performance. At some point, you'll see the handheld camera right on Gaga, and then all of a sudden on another take, it's like, oh, whoop, now it's the Steadicam. So very fascinating to watch it work, watch them, and every once in a while, like at this moment, they cut into the shot that they actually used from the film. So I would highly recommend people take a look at it. Super interesting.
Sometimes these behind the scene things can teach you a lot about how it actually works. And that idea, you think you're watching a performance, but this was probably a whole day's worth of shooting to capture this scene. You've got multi-cameras going, you've got multi-performances, roll back to one, let's do it again. We're going to switch cameras so we get different shots. in a major motion picture like this, and this depends on the director of photography and the director working together to decide how much coverage they need. But it wouldn't surprise me if they didn't have hundreds upon hundreds of potential angles and takes to piece this scene together with. And, this is a major, major endeavor. It's also interesting. You're seeing Steadicam operators and handheld operators, and each one of those might be shooting there. But if the director wants a tap, you see all the attendant people around that. Sometimes if they're tethered and they have a cable back, but they're probably using all wireless back to Video Village so that the director or director of photography can watch each shot as it happens in real time and make sure they've got the coverage they want. These are huge productions, just complicated and brilliantly done.
Yeah, sometimes it's just a spotter to make sure somebody doesn't
and boy, or possibly unsung, because I know every time I'm shooting, I can get into a circumstance where I'm about to step off a stage and fall into a pit. I've been there in my early career, and it would without somebody to let me know, because you're just in the moment trying to execute the shot, and you're thinking of nothing but getting all those things right. And yeah, you can hurt yourself very badly. I've fallen off of things, and I've hit my rear end to the ground more times than I can tell you.
Yeah, the comedian Kevin James has also done a series of things where he's a sound guy. And he does one of these with this clip where he's a sound guy, and they keep cutting to him, and he's wiping the tears out of his eyes. And, yeah, it's very funny. So also worth watching.
Hard work, and I don't know. I noticed the camera operator. He's almost like grimacing. It's hard work to keep track of keeping a steady camera, frame the shot perfectly, and those guys spend years physically training themselves to be able to hold that many pound camera on a shoulder or a steady camera. Oh,
that's pretty easy.
Sure. Only someone who's never tried to do it would say that. Mitch, you had some thoughts.
Yeah, have you ever talked to Garrett Brown, the inventor of the Steadicam, and his first shot, I think, was running up the steps the art museum for Rocky. It does take its toll on your knees. So a lot of, you can see old Steadicam operators don't retire. They have their knees replaced.
Well, knees, upper body, the twisting stuff that happens. I mean, you've got this thing strapped to your torso, literally, and it's not normal to have that much weight. You can see he's wearing a belt. There's an arm that is attached to the middle of the entire Steadicam rig. It floats, but that is a whole bunch of weight that you're pushing around and moving, even if it's perfectly balanced. I remember my longest day of doing any kind of Steadicam work like that was probably 4 hours. And at the end of the 4 hour days, in pieces, not 4 hours contiguously, but a half an hour shoot, change locations, do another half an hour. And at the end of the day, I was just beat. Just so many micro muscles that I wasn't used to using. Not an easy thing. Courtney?
Now, this question probably should have been in part 2 today, hour 2 today for camera moves. But the Steadicam operator and the handheld cam operator, it's tough on your knees. You'll look at both of them. They'll have their knees bent to take a lot of the vertical pop out of the shot. Steadicam helps remove some of that. And no, it wasn't the shot in Rocky that was the first Steadicam shot. It was the shot in Bound for Glory, where Garrett Brown started on top of standing on a crane platform, and he came down on a crane shot, then stepped off the crane and walked through the crowd and up to Woody Guthrie. That shot was the first Steadicam shot.
You are correct, sir.
But the most difficult thing in doing a shot like the one Chris showed is when you've got two handheld cameras in working at the same time in the same shot, is the choreography, making sure that A camera doesn't get in B camera's shot unless it's something where there's supposed to be cameras there and they can kind of sneak in as an on-camera camera. But keeping out of the other camera shot, you have to organize that in advance. And a good camera operator knows that, okay, A camera's on a 30 millimeter fixed focal length, and they know pretty much the field of coverage of that film, of that camera lens. So he can kind of glance out of the side of his eye to see where the other cameraman is, to come right up to the edge of the frame so that he can get a good shot, and they can both get a good shot without getting in each other's shot, which is the big problem.
Go ahead, Chris.
I was going to say, at one point, there's a point where Bradley Cooper walks over to the wing to get Gaga to come out and sing with him. And if you watch the wide shot carefully, you can see that the Steadicam operator is following him over right as she is walking up. And yeah, the choreography is absolutely not coincidental. It's very tightly choreographed.
No, and blocking and all the rest of those things have to be rehearsed and performed. I also want to note in that shot where we saw there are two gigantic camera rigs, 4 or 5 people out there, and you're asking these two actors to act, and specifically I was noticing the camera moves in front of Lady Gaga's face and she's looking essentially at the audience. And I don't for a moment believe that she's looking ever into the camera, even though the angle is very close, and it would have been so easy for any actor to go, wait a second, what's that? And, good actors have to be physically aware of everything about what they're doing at the moment they're doing it so that they don't break character and blow a take by doing that. I'm looking directly into the camera, and that's unnatural. It's just, there's a lot of stuff going on to make really good, compelling content like this. Thank you, Chris, for bringing that to us. That was fun to watch. And I think we're going to go off on to our next question now.
And Chris Widener from Lafayette, Indiana has our next question. YouTube app on iOS seemed really buggy yesterday and crashed where confirmed by Google with a fix pending. When these kinds of bugs happen, is it worth doing YouTube embedding as a backup since it can affect the view stats?
Unfortunately, I know very little about how the YouTube works at that. This is another one where Alex would be a great resource for us since he does a lot of this kind of thing. Unfortunately, nobody else has raised a hand, so we're going to have to pass on this one, Chris. That's I think at least 2 strikes for you today. I'm sorry about that. Hopefully we won't have another. Let's move on to the next question.
Paul Terry Wallace in Austin, Texas asked, how many YouTube videos do you watch in a day? Ballpark on average? And what are a couple of great YouTube videos you've seen lately?
Chris Fenwick will help us out here.
If I had to choose between YouTube and television, I'd pick YouTube. I watch YouTube every time something is rendering on my computer. A good one to watch, the one we just talked about, Paul. Ballpark, 100 YouTube videos a day. A lot.
Wow.
I watch a lot of YouTube. It's super inspirational. And frankly, I'd rather watch a cat playing the piano than most of the stuff that's on TV anyway. and obviously there's a lot more than just cats playing piano.
Courtney Gooden.
Yeah, I watch a lot of YouTube a day. Ever since I got this app that runs on my Fire TV called Smart TV, which eliminates all the advertising, even the mentions and, the standard opens that are on the top of all regular shows, where they have their standard open animation. It'll jump over that stuff automatically. No commercials. And that has made my YouTube viewing go up quite a bit. And I look at, Answers with Joe. That's good. I look like, a lot of tech how-to videos and a lot of repair videos. And I find fascinating, there's some really stupid, like electronics repair school. Look for that. It's this little guy, Ukrainian guy. I'm not sure, Armenian, Romanian. He has a very funny accent. And I'm not sure where he is because he mentions prices in dollars. But he repairs laptops and things like that all day. And he just does this stream. And it's like stream of consciousness. There's no cutting, there's no editing, and he's figuring it out as he goes. So you watch him repairing laptops, and he's talking about what he does and what the problem might be. And so you kind of work your way through that problem with him. And so it's kind of interesting to go on that journey to see if he can repair it or not.
Yeah, I love it, but I have to stop myself because it is so, there's millions of hours of content out there every month that just gets fed, and the algorithms are sometimes weird. I want to fire up a VPN now whenever I go on there, because I know that if I get distracted, that's an interesting thing that's a jazz combo doing 1920s music. So I'll watch it thinking I'll see this once in my life and never come back to it. And the next time I come back to YouTube, there's 34 1920s jazz videos waiting for me in my feed, and I have to get past them because it was just a passing fancy, and I didn't really want that to be part of who they think I am, but that's going to be very difficult to do. But yeah, my feed gets I call it kind of infected with my mistakes as I looked up something that was curious for me for just a moment, but not core.
Is it really a mistake though, Bill? Or is it just the real you?
It's a good question, but no, but I have a friend who's an executive in one of the large Japanese electronics company. And he sent me once I think it was K-pop video. And I thought, this is really interesting. It's a Japanese band that does hard rock. And so heavy metal with 3 young ladies, Japanese. He sent me the link. I thought, this is really charming. And I wrote him back and said, that was great. And then for weeks, I had just so many K-pop and Japanese popular things. Just every time I looked on the feed, I went, there's another group from Japan. They think I want to soak myself in this. And I wanted to see what he sent me. That's all. So I don't know. The algorithms confuse me totally.
You're a K-pop fan, admit it.
Yeah, well, some of it was really good. But then it started looking all the same. Oh, look, they're doing exactly. But that's probably my lack of appreciation and understanding the nuances. But that's not something I wanted to be 50% of my feed. Thank you very much. Anyway, let's move on. Or Courtney, did we get to? Yeah, did we get to your comment?
Yeah, I was just going to say, Japanese would hate you calling their music K-pop.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. That's Korean popular music. I should be more specific about that. Was it Blackpink? I'm trying to think of the name of the other group that was not out of the Korean side that got me first into the milieu. And then the next thing I know, they connected me to K-pop. And the next thing you know, I'm watching all these people.
Backstreet Boys are back.
There you go. Well, it's just the algorithms trying to decide what I'm trying to do rather than me having much control over it. That's why I said it's about time to fire up a VPN anytime I go on any of those big services and make sure that they can't follow me, because Lord knows what it's going to do to my regular feed. All right. Next question.
In from Chris Widener in Lafayette, Indiana. I'm still trying to find my perfect portable production table. What do people think of this link? Weight is high, but...
Mitchell's going to help us. Mitch?
He ain't heavy. He's my table. While you're in Home Depot, check out the Husky for $300. It's a wonderful hardtop, crankable tabletop. But how portable it is, I can't honestly say.
Yeah, I've had a couple of them over the years. I will tell you, I think I mentioned the other day on the show that I used to write a lot and I was traveling a lot at the same time. And when I was on deadline for the articles for the magazine, I would find myself often writing in airports. And I had a couple of tables that served me well. The most successful one was a very lightweight single top, a very thin top that you screwed onto the top of a small folding stand. And the whole thing collapsed, was so small I could literally put it in my briefcase along with my laptop. And I used that a good little bit. I still have it in there and I still use it. I also had a tabletop that was plastic and had 4 aluminum extension legs. It was a little less stable, but if I had to go on location and I could throw a piece of gaffer's tape around it and had a little more time, those 4 legs made a much more stable surface for putting something like my bag on that I was going to reach in to get stuff out of. So I've had a couple of those. You have to be careful. A lot of the inexpensive ones are pretty cheaply made, but they can be useful. Chris, you had some thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. Chris, I would recommend, if you're going to carry around something that can help you carry around something. I would get a mag liner with a tabletop add-on. You put this thing on the top, you put all your gear down below. It's sturdy. It'll survive a nuclear holocaust. You can run over cockroaches with it. It's super strong, and you can carry your stuff. And you have a nice surface on top. That's what I would do. There
you go, Chris. Courtney.
Well, the best one that I found, unfortunately, isn't made anymore. I don't think it was from a Costco, not Costco, but you can buy them at Costco. Was this one over here that has this 3/4? It has the back wheels. It's a hand truck, so it folds flat, fits in your car very easily, and it has this mode where it goes 3/4. And I built a little fold flat shelf that comes in here and comes out horizontally when it's in this mode that I put my cases on. And then the angled part here, I have a part where you can carry these type of cases fit in right to that. If I could get that picture back again, it would be lovely, but it's awfully hard. But unfortunately, last time I went to Costco, they replaced it and they don't have this little drop down piece on the back. It's now only goes in 2 modes, horizontal and vertical. So my my days of building the little adapters, and I've built several of them, are over.
Okay, we're going to try to get through these two more questions real quick. Three more questions real quick. Let's dive to the next one.
Paul Terry Wallace from Austin, Texas says, what's the best wellness and fitness Christmas gift?
Ooh, that's a tough one. No one weighed in on something like that. Most of the wellness things that I think are critically important, like a good office chair, things like that, because we do sit as editors so much, they're pretty expensive. So if you've got a lot of money and you can get into some of the infrastructure things like that, great. But I can't think of anything off the top of my head that's in that category. That everybody's just so different, and what I need may not be what somebody else needs. So I have a hard time doing that. Let's go to the next question.
Chris Widener, Lafayette, Indiana, asked, the YouTube top trending videos list just came out. And has the list surprised anyone? Mark Rober is the list again, unsurprisingly.
Maybe he's top of the list. Mitch, what are your thoughts?
As long as it doesn't have cats on it, I don't mind.
Okay, here's going to be an anti-cat day for, there you go. Last question before we get to our second hour here.
Paul Terry Wallace is back from Austin, Texas. Lumen has a handheld hardware device with an app that looks a bit like a vape. A built-in sensor measures the level of CO2 produced to determine metabolic fuel usage, whether the body is using burning carbs or FAR for fuel. Not sure what that is. Will you get this?
I probably won't, but I think in every serious exercise physiologist lab, there is probably that exhalation tube hookup. I've seen people, running on treadmills, and that's one of the ways they determine your metabolic efficiency. The fact that they're kind of trying to go into the consumer-ish space with something that can do that, I'm not at all surprised. Courtney, you had a thought?
Well, during COVID, I bought a clip-on pulse oximeter, which will read your pulse and tell you how much your blood oxygen you have, which is a good indication of how healthy you are as far as your respiratory system goes and your heart goes. So that's a good choice for something like that. And it doesn't tell you how much CO2, but how much oxygen you have.
Yeah, I think they're talking about having some sort of reader in the watches coming up about determining some of that stuff. So it's obviously something a lot of people are interested in and want to make a part of their lives. All right, I think it's time to make our turnover here. We've gone about 6 minutes over, but that's fine. So today's discussion, and this was originally designed to be kind of the video day on Thursday, and I tossed this out in the panel that determines what our show topics are going to be out, and somebody latched onto it and said, yeah, we should do that, and we should do it pretty quickly before we get into the big next year stuff where things might get crowded. So the talking camera is what I subtitled this, and let me explain to you why I did that. I used to write those articles for Videomaker, and every month I had to come up with a different topic, and I remember we were tossing around ideas at one point decades ago, and somebody said, well, how do you know when how do you know how much pan is too much pan? How much zoom is too much zoom? How do you determine whether a move, any kind of a move, is a reasonable move or you're being excessive with it? And so I thought about it for a while, and I wrote an article called The Talking Camera. And basically it's built around this premise that every move you make, every camera move you make as an operator communicates with your audience, whether you understand that or not. So it's reasonable to ask yourself, what am I saying by making this move? And there are a whole bunch of traditional camera moves. In fact, there are 5 of them that I'm going to talk, and then one that's a little not as traditional. And here they are just in kind of overview. Pans, tilts, zooms, which is technically not a camera move, but we'll talk about that anyway. Trucking, that's what it's called when you move right or left on a dolly, dollying in or dollying out, and pedestal, which is camera up or down. Those are kind of the traditional ones I learned as I was coming up in the industry. And so you've got these moves at your disposal. And my question to myself was, does each of them mean something? And can I be consistent about what they mean? And if I do that, can I help the audience understand my subjects more? And I'm going to dive into this first question here because I want to put a little break and give people time to think about it. And then I'll come back with analyzing each of those moves, What does a pan mean? What does a zoom mean? What do dolly moves mean? And can you figure out why it's a good idea to use them at a particular time? But TJ, let's go to the first question from TJ first.
From TJ Asher in Minneapolis, Minnesota. How do I develop my eye to help see the start of a shot, the end of a shot, and the transition from start to end? I have a very hard time seeing a moving shot since I come from a stills background.
And TJ, that doesn't surprise me at all. I had the same issue. I was lucky. I actually started in video first, but when I developed my eye as a still photographer, it was interesting that I had to really reorient my thinking, because everything I thought was, I'm going to start on this framing, I'm going to move through it in this way, and I'm going to end on this framing. That to me is a well-executed shot. And as still, obviously, you're looking for the decisive moment that you can freeze in time to communicate to your audience. Mitch, what are your thoughts about this?
Since he's still background, I would say do a storyboard, because you can map out the images and the direction and the choreography quite easily.
Yeah, and all that planning is very, very helpful, because if you know kind of the arc of the story you're trying to tell, you can plot it out. I'm going to go ahead and dive back into my slides here. I wanted to at least get one question in beforehand, but let me kind of break down all of them. I'm going to show you the ones, and let's just talk about what these camera moves are. Everybody knows them. The first one is a pan left to right. That's an illustration of kind of what happens. The second one, a tilt up or down. Both of those moves happen on a pivot point, usually on top of a tripod, right? Zoom is a little different in that is a thing that is done by the camera lens setting. So we're going to consider it as part of these moves, but it's really kind of a traditional cinematographer would probably say this is outside of their thing, because they don't usually zoom. But we have pan, tilt, zoom heads, and more of this is automated, and they're used constantly. Dolly is moving the camera physically toward or away from the subject that you're shooting. So dolly in and dolly out are typical camera move calls. Trucking is moving the camera horizontally in front of a subject, and pedestal is the traditional term for moving the camera up or down. That is probably the least used of all of these. So here is my conception of when I started teaching this stuff and designed this lesson. I thought, if you're saying something to your audience, what are you saying? And will understanding that help you understand whether or not to do it? So here's my thoughts on what these things mean. A pan basically means, look over here, I want to show you something interesting. If there's nothing interesting that you're going to show them to the right or the left of the shot you currently have, there is no justification for panning. In other words, I'm going to tell them, when I make this move, if I do a tilt, the same thing. Look up here or look down here. I want to show you something interesting. This is how the camera operator is communicating with the audience. In terms of zooms, it becomes, in the context of this framing, I want you to concentrate on this object by zooming into it. And the reverse of that is that if you're starting with a close-up, you can put that object into the context of the shot by zooming out. So you are directing the eye of the person. A zoom out essentially says it exists in this environment. This is where this thing I just showed you is. The dolly moves are, I think, very interesting. And this is, you're kind of joining your audience. You're saying, let's both take a closer or farther look at this. You are inviting your audience to change their perspective along with you as the camera operator. So it's less passive and more active. And the truck is the same thing. Let's both go and look at something over here. And you often see these like in a Woody Allen movie or something like that, where two characters are walking along and talking, and you're joining them in their dialogue by your point of view camera walking along with them. The pedestal is a little weirder in that normally we don't get a chance to be taller or shorter, but it is basically saying to your audience, let's examine this from a different perspective. So to me, that is kind of the language of a talking camera. When you're going to decide to do something, for me, the critical thing is, does the shot pay off? If I'm standing and with my camcorder and I'm looking at a lighthouse, and I pan right and I'm panning at the sea, if my goal is just to show them the lighthouse is next to the sea, I'm not sure if that's a particularly good move. Now, if the lighthouse is here and there's a storm at sea or something like that, then, look, the lighthouse is there to protect against that. That I can see as being a reasonable move. But I have seen so many people who are beginning camera operators start with a decent shot, and then they've panned off to something that is completely useless. It's like just a boring, dull shot. It's gotten less interesting rather than more interesting. And you just want to go, why did you do that? What was the point of moving from an interesting view to a non-interesting move? You should have just shot it as a shot, leave it alone, find another shot that's interesting, rather than thinking that moving the camera is a substitute for framing interesting stuff. So that was my theory originally. And boy, it served me well, because every time I start to make a camera move, I'm going, what am I moving to? Why am I doing this? And if I can't articulate that why in the context of what I just explained, I'm just going to leave the shot as a static shot. Let's go down to the next question. Answer a couple of questions in here before we move on.
And it comes from Courtney Gooden in Hollywood, California. If the director asked for a Mickey Rooney, what camera move should you do?
I'm going to say, well, let's let Mitchell and then Courtney. Mitchell, what are your thoughts?
You have to put a call out for a short Irish guy. That's for starters.
Mickey Rooney or Billy Mooney.
To take the camera and move very slowly. I think that's it.
Courtney?
Yeah, it's a very slow move in, sometimes called a short creep. If anybody who's ever worked with Mickey Rooney knows what
Let's keep it working.
He's no longer with us.
There is something to be said, though.
May rest in peace. But
the speed at which any of these moves take place, I'm going to try to avoid getting a nasty letter from the estate of Mr. Rooney. The speed at which you execute these moves is pretty critical. And that's a decision as a camera operator you're going to have to make. Watch sometimes. Most of these camera moves take place in serious movie making much slower than you would otherwise think. Very seldom do you get fast pans, and in fact, there is an exception to that, but I'll talk about it in a second. And most of the time, the reason that we invest so much in good camera support equipment like tripods with seriously good fluid heads is because it allows us to put just the right amount of drag so that you can make a very, very slow pan that kind of incrementally exposes what's over here that also looks really cool, or gets us to the lighthouse in the frame, or whatever you're trying to do as a shot executor. Slow and less obvious is usually a good thing. Now, there's another kind of a pan called a whip pan, which is almost like a special effects, where you take a camera that's pointed in one direction and you move it very quickly over to the other direction. And those are kind of fun. It adds a lot of energy to a shot. You see them often in music videos and things like that. You even see fake ones where they start with a shot and then they do some sort of blurred transition to the next shot. You can kind of fake that in electronics. But that is more a transition between shots kind of effect than it is executing the entire shot. Courtney, you had more thoughts?
It doesn't have anything to do with my Mickey Rooney question, but but you brought up something is the deliberate camera move that's designed to add to the drama. And if you look at the movies of Frank Darabont, who wrote and directed Shawshank Redemption, Green Mile, and a few other great films. And analyze that film, because the camera is constantly moving, and it's constantly moving to motivate the drama in the scene. It'll be doing a slow push in as there's a Morgan Freeman voiceover, and you're seeing the pathos on the actor's face start to come in. There's no words or dialogue happening, and the camera move is what adds to the drama of the scene. And every camera move is well motivated and adds to the emotional impact of the scene. In fact, if you want to read something funny, search for Frank Darabont's leaked emails on The Walking Dead. He was so upset with after seeing dailies. He wrote and directed some of that first season on The Walking Dead. You can find it on Variety. It's if you saw the original emails, they're not suitable for work because he gets quite explicit in his instructions on firing the C camera operator because he's shaking the camera all over the place. And he's saying that he wrote into the dialogue, into the script, how the camera should move, how it should be covered. And by gosh, you better pay attention to every comma in that script and every instruction because that's how he wants it shot. And so it's very purposeful. And he takes all of that into account, even when he's writing the dialogue.
Yeah. People take this stuff very seriously because a pan that's too fast or jarring that takes you out of the acting, the content, and pulls you back into watching how the movie is made is a break. And, the whole point of movies, the whole point of content really is this thing we call suspension of disbelief. When you can make something that people can start watching and they kind of wake up at the end having learned something, and we're not involved in the step by step, but just accepted it as you took them through a subject. That's really what we're all aiming for as editors or shooters or anything else, is to get them focused on the ideas that you're presenting and leave them there. And all these little subtle things. And I think Courtney articulated it beautifully. That little push in on somebody who's in an emotional state, that is the human life equivalent of moving closer to somebody, making, your perspective on them more intimate. We learn from being tiny, tiny people that when you pick up a baby and hug it, you're bringing it closer to you. When you fall in love for the first time and go in for your first legitimate kiss, you're moving closer to people. It makes it more close, more personal. And that is a perspective that is very intimate. And because of that, directors understand that. And usually, that kissing scene between two actors who are in a relationship is shot very close because it exposes the intimacy of that. You very seldom get, that shot from the other side of the room if it's supposed to be truly an intimate moment between two characters. So, yeah, very interesting stuff. Let's go on to the next question.
Next question coming in from Chris Widener in Lafayette, Indiana. Jib or gibberish? What's your go-to resource for teaching kids the lingo? Had a 16-year-old man think I was being funny when I said we needed to set up a boom with the jib. He answered, "Arr, Captain."
Well, this industry is absolutely notable for a tremendous amount of jargon. Often it's because you need shorthands on sets to be able to work efficiently. And, I can say, bring me a Mole Richardson 6K instrument and a scrim on it, but you'll have somebody scream, "Give me a blonde and a grid," and they move on. And it's that jargon that has shorthanded for efficiency on a set. And if you don't understand the shorthand, often it's easy to miss. It seems like a foreign environment when you first get on a set because there's just so much of that going on. But these are people who have worked together usually for months, if not years. And I think in every community like that, shorthand language becomes key to things. Mitchell, you want to weigh in on it?
The film industry has been driven by tradition for a very long time. So there's a lot of terms that have come up from the dim reaches of history that still seem to work. There's some questions that are coming up that we'll talk about, but I think it's interesting to keep it in a perspective that a lot of these terms are very, very old terms.
They are. And when you ask, why did they call it truck? And somewhere on a set early in the process, in order to do that, with big cameras, with Hollywood cameras, in order to do any kind of move and keep it steady, you don't have the tools we have today. And they used to have to set up something like a Fisher dolly, which is an extraordinarily heavy monster piece of gear. Often it would be mounted on tracks or rails on the ground. And so a crew of 3 or 4 people may had to work 2 or 3 hours getting set up for a single shot with this large, heavy dolly with a big Panavision camera on top of it. So once you did all that, it was mission critical to get the shot just right. And thankfully, those things were built to such a high precision technical standard that getting a smooth shot on a well set up dolly to do a truck left or truck right was a long, involved process. So you wanted the shot to be beautiful, well executed. And, you had these specialists like dolly grips and things like that, whose job was just to make sure that all the movements happened correctly. The cinematographer was there, maybe riding along with the dolly, but making sure that the camera was pointed exactly where they wanted, had the right leading zone for the actors walking along. It's a ballet, and it's a complicated thing. Now, we have much less expensive tools. We now have little jibs and handheld things, and we can get pretty close to some of those shots. So it's important to know. But when you're holding a dolly and a director says, okay, I like the shot, truck right, and you don't know what they mean by that, you don't understand what they're trying to communicate to you, things break down and you have to stop for a moment and have it explained to you, which is not good on set when you might, with all the actors and crew and everything, be burning tens or hundreds of thousands, sometimes even with Hollywood A-listers, millions of dollars an hour for the time of all the people involved in that and their salaries being so high. Courtney, you had thoughts?
Yeah, it drives me nuts is when I'm on the set. I know there's a new director that's new into the industry. If they're telling me things like, well, I want the camera to tilt right or, or pan down and then pan into a close-up. And you go, you're right. This guy's didn't even pay attention in film school that he just graduated from. And that's
because he's probably just out of high school.
Yeah, there's tons of terms that are used for shot size, like a cowboy. Yeah, explain that one. And, 2 T's or, describing the shot size besides the short creep and the pan,
MCU and all the rest
down. Yes, you have to tell the director, no, pan is horizontal movement, tilt is vertical movement.
Well, that's why we go over these basic stuff. Hopefully this will keep you updated. Mitch, you had another
the truck is moving the dolly.
Yeah, that's right. And no, you don't have to go to Toys R Us to get one. Mitch?
I can't believe he got 2 T's in there. Okay. I don't think I can top that one. There are a lot of new phrases, too, like stunt camera. Because back in the day, you didn't toss cameras out, but
crash
stunt
cam.
camera's the thing. Yeah, crash cam.
Yeah. Give me an expendable. Give me that the camera that I was lusting after and trying to save up money for it. They're considering it the same expendables as a roll of gaffer's tape. Well, sometimes you get up in those rarefied budgets and actually that kind of stuff happens. Let's go on to the next question.
From David Brady in New York, please discuss and give examples of the Dolly Zoom, its history and aesthetic uses. Okay,
so let's talk about the two things, right? We talked about dollying and being able to move the camera on some kind of mobile platform, whether it's on wheels or on some sort of base that has movability to it. So you're moving in toward an object, and that has a particular aesthetic look. If you ever get a comparison between dollying towards something and zooming in towards something, there's a lot of the optics involved and the shots look different. Well, somebody figured out, and maybe Courtney knows the first film they did it on, I know Hitchcock used it and some other people use it, where they would both move the camera and zoom simultaneously. And it is a bit of a disorienting feeling. Because two different optical things are happening. You're moving towards something, but you're also zooming either in, or more often you're moving toward it, but zooming out. And it has a perspective warping kind of effect that is really singular and looks very interesting. Courtney, thoughts about that?
Yeah, Spielberg has a tendency to put it in most of his films. He put it in his very first theatrical feature, which was Sugarland Express. I will play a sample of it here, not full screen, so that you can see it. If I can click on it. Oh, and here it's over here. You can see the perspective changing as the guy on the left holds a consistent size, but it compresses the perspective to see the car coming in on the background there. So
excellent example.
And he used it also in Jaws. There's a famous scene where Roy Scheider is sitting on the beach and they are dollying back and zooming in at the same time. And so they're compressing the background in. So you see the people behind him come up, but he stays the same size in the foreground. So he's used it in a number of films. And he discovered it, I think, in film school and decided he wanted to use it in Sugarland Express.
Mitchell?
Hitchcock, very famous move.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's a lot of ways you can do it, but it has and you just saw the perspective shift. I mean, normally if you were zooming, you would be zooming past the gunman in the window on that shot. And so the combination of the camera pulling back while you're zooming in is what gives you that odd perspective. Let's move on to the next question.
Next question in from Douglas Carmichael. Are there different camera terms used in the U.S. and UK?
Mitchell, you want to start us off?
Yeah. I mean, it's been a thing for a long time, and a lot of them have sort of migrated over to this particular coast. My favorite is focus puller. That made its way from the UK over here.
Yeah, there's a variety of them. I mean, director of photography in America is often referred to as a lighting cameraman in the British system. There are a variety of things. I mean, the jobs remain the same, but the language is slightly different. And I've even heard, not so much in photography terms, but in grip gear and stuff like that, I've even heard differences on the east and west coasts of the United States. There would be one term for one colloquial term on the set for something, and somebody asked for an X. I can't think of an example right now. Somebody asked for a stinger here, and it's something else over there. This is fluid, and there are different crews who have different experiences under different things. And before, there weren't a lot of film schools in the early days as Hollywood was growing up, and everybody was kind of reinventing this for themselves each time. There was a lot of filmmaking in the very early days in New York before Chicago and got involved, and then of course the LA film industry grew like crazy in the 1920s and beyond. So there are some regional differences here. Courtney?
Yeah, the one I had to get used to when working with British directors was they don't say roll camera or roll sound. They go turnover. Turnover.
Apple or peach?
First time that happened, I went, what? Huh? Turnover what? The next page of the script? Is that what? Oh, roll. That's what you mean.
And there is actually a cadence on most fancy sets of checking two or three things. It's not just, okay, action. There's like speed and audio is checked with, and there's two or three ways on a set that every department checks in to make sure that everybody is ready to go before the usually assistant director, it's not usually the director doing it, but it says, okay, action. And the actual performance of the scene takes place. It's these are habits, but boy, the last thing you want to do is get the perfect take and find out that sound wasn't rolling. That is not good. So before you hear speed and the rest of those things, you want to make sure that you hold off on getting to action. Next question.
From Chris Widener in Lafayette, Indiana. What descriptive framing terms have you heard used commonly? There was a circumstance where apple boxes were used to bring up the leading man's stature for a commercial I was working on, and the older actor used a term I can't remember. What's the actor's very famous actor in the early days was Mitch has it. Mitch, dive in. They call it a tall maker.
Well, no, that's what our dear friend who just left us. No, it wasn't Audie Murphy. It was somebody of that era who was not particularly tall of stature, but was a very famous Hollywood leading man. And why is it escaping me now? Probably because that was when I was.
Know.
Yeah, we shouldn't continue to pick on Mickey Rooney. I think that
it was Alan Ladd.
Alan Ladd, that's right. Yeah,
Alan Ladd. They used to have to actually, if they had a walk and talk scene with Alan Ladd with an actress, they had to dig a ditch so she could walk in the ditch next to him, because either that or they had to build a runway, what they call a runway, which is a bunch of apple boxes and plywood on it so that the short actor could walk and be as tall as his leading ladies as he walked along, and he couldn't use, elevator boots.
You see, getting to the first rule of movie making, in my opinion, it doesn't have to be real, just has to look real. There's a good example when you're digging a trench, and I will say this, if any of you are young or want to be actors or actresses out there, and you go through this casting process, which is vicious. I mean, it's just very difficult because you're being judged on you, right? So you're out there and you're in a room with 10 other actors or 10 other actresses, and they're trying to figure out, and you want the job and you don't know why you're not getting picked this month, or maybe luckily you still haven't been picked. You want to get picked. These kinds of things are discussions that often happen in the production room. I really like her, but she's 4 inches off on that. That means we're going to have to deal with that every shot. We have another actress who's just about equivalent, but is a better match in this pairing. And on photo shoots and on video shoots, I've heard those discussions happening. It's not always about your talent, your look, your lack of talent, or anything like that. It can be these odd little things that cause a casting decision to be made either for you or against you, and there's often nothing you can do. So my suggestion to all the actresses and models I've ever worked with who've expressed to me that frustration about why am I not getting more roles, you never know. You never know. For a while, tall actresses are all the rage, and then you get very actresses of much less stature, and that becomes popular for a while. Who knows? It's just all kind of crazy. Next question.
Harshit Trivedi from Daytona Beach, Florida, and right here on our panel asked, as a child visiting the earthquake ride at Universal Studios, they show an example of how they created a fiery explosion. However, it was done on a small model with almost matches like fire. What kind of cam work did they do to capture this effect?
Mitch, start us off.
Oh, I know what they call it now. I don't know what they might have called it then. It could be a macro or a snorkel cam. One has a very long lens that goes in and shoots the shot from a distance.
Yeah, forced perspective is a huge deal in this. Courtney?
Yeah, there was a lens that was a relay lens called a Fraser lens that they would use for a while, which lets you, it had a snorkel with a prism and a drop down. And so you could put it right, it made the camera be like something that was only about an inch or two across. So you could get down on a tabletop shooting miniatures and dolly in with it. And it had an infinite depth of field. So it made everything look, small things look much bigger because everything was in focus, rather than if you get down and get a macro lens, then you'll notice that your depth of field changes radically and stuff in the background looks out of focus and makes it look like a miniature. So they use something like a snorkel lens or a Fraser lens to do that. And fire is, a lot of times they will use miniature explosions. There are certain chemicals that special effects men use to create miniature flames that look more realistic, and they create black smoke and a lot of billowing flames on a very small scale. In fact, some of it is that stuff you use to treat pimples with.
Really?
Benzoyl peroxide. Yeah, they use that
to
actually burn that to create miniature special effects.
Nice. Hershey.
Yeah, I just had a comment. Thank you for that. That's exactly what they did. They had a miniature layout that basically you saw a film beforehand before you got into the ride, and then they raised the screen up and they just show you this miniature, and you see a bunch of smoke, and I think it's LA or what have you. And as you meant, that's really interesting to know. It's that camera that gives you that effect of a big explosion because of the building shaking or gas lines exploding and stuff like that. So thanks.
Well, and here on the show, we spent some time with Alex on the Star Wars sets where they did the Death Star and things like that. And that's all miniatures photography and beautifully executed to the point where it started a gigantic worldwide phenomenon.
They also shoot slow-mo. They speed up the camera so that things that are moving in the frame move slower, so they seem bigger.
Yeah, we tend to call that overcranked in the industry. Let me do a couple more little thoughts here from my presentation. I want to talk about executing shots because we've been talking about moving the camera. And whenever you move the camera, you really do have an issue with shot execution. All camera shots, in my thinking, have a beginning, a middle, and an end. And this is one of the areas where it differs from still photography, where you're looking for that executable moment, because you're not going to have a perfect moment always in the beginning of your shot. I've used the example of if you're going to be opening a door to reveal a character coming through, the first shot is not going to be that beautiful shot. It's a blank door. But if as soon as you cut to that shot, the door opens and action continues, it can be just as compelling as starting on the first shot. So I always ask myself these questions. I have to figure out, where do I want to start this sequence? How do I want to get there? At what speed and through what path do I want to execute? And most importantly to me is where I want to end up. To me, this is where most moving camera shots fail. And you can cut away from a shot in action. There's nothing wrong with that. And it's done all the time. But it has a certain effect on the viewer if you're taking them somewhere and suddenly you stop them and you make them go someplace else. I just think it's very important to plan this out. If you are a if you're making videos and you're trying to communicate really well with your audience, know for each shot that you're going to execute, where you think it's best to start, the speed and or path you want to take to get to where it's going to end, but most importantly, where it's going to end, so that you end on something, particularly for your editor, so that they know when the shot is there and they have a little bit of tail, that they can decide how fast they want to get out of the shot or linger on it, depending on what happened during the scene itself. Next question.
Next question, in from Josh Kaufman in Pittsburgh, PA. Similar versus contrasting camera moves in succession. Do similar moves, zoom, pan, etc., tie parallel thoughts together? When to use contrasting moves versus parallel moves? Is there a rule? And if so, when can it be broken?
Well, I don't think that, it depends on the flow of the ideas. We've seen videos made where the camera starts out on a subject and then starts panning and the next person comes in, and then you keep going through a whole series of people, and that continuous motion around what feels like a round table. A lot of music videos use that quite effectively. There's other times when panning right for one character or panning left to show another one. I used to talk about creating presentations, and I used a variation of this technique so that when I was showing the main presenter on camera, they were here. The transition I used to the next shot was a push slide to the right, but every time I push slide to the right, I would show a diagram of something, and then I would move from that back to the center, and then a push slide to the left would show an actuality. In other words, actors showing that scene, and then I'd come back to the center. And by figuring out that move progression, I hoped to help my audience understand, when we go this way, you're about to see a diagram, and they'd be kind of mentally prepared for that. And then we'd always come back, and when we go the other side, you're about to see that thing. So you're building a language with your audience, and that's the same way I thought about most of these moves. So do you need consistency? Do you need to fulfill your audience's expectations about what happens when you move right? Is that part of your thinking about this? Do you want to confuse them a little? And there are techniques for confusing your audience. We talked a little bit about crossing the line, and that is, when you're shooting from the audience on stage, the person who's moving on from their left to right on stage looks to you in the audience as if they're moving from right to left. You take a camera, move it up stage so that you're shooting from behind the performer out to the audience. All those directions change. So there's some, and that can momentarily confuse the audience if you don't somehow telegraph to them that you're moving in a different direction. And all these things make a shot either comfortable or unsettling to the audience. And it's a tool you can use to do that. Courtney?
Yeah, the camera moves like that and crossing the line is to give you a sense of space, to establish, even though you may only have 3 walls in your set, it'll establish a sense of space for the audience to know where they are in the room and where the other actors are in the room. And crossing the line is a lot of times what's used, doing a camera move where you move counter to the actor's move. The actor's moving left in the space and the camera's moving right. It's to change its perspective, to shift its perspective from one side of the room to the other side of the room. And it does that with a counter move so that the other actor that the actor is talking to comes into frame as they move counter to the camera move. So a lot of times those contrapuntal camera moves are used to get actors to cross the room and let the camera cross the line so that you change the position of the 2 actors to each other within the room, and it lets you see the other side of the room a lot of times.
And to understand how important this is, I mean, we all enjoyed watching Chris Fenwick's examples of the stuff from A Star Is Born, but you'll notice that both of those cameras were on the same stage left side shooting the 2 people. And that was there, that, you didn't suddenly see them over on the other side unless there's something motivated where we're going over to the other side. And, if you watch that and break down, they will orient you. A good director, good editor will orient you so that you know kind of where you're watching it from. And if you're doing something like a crazy, wacky slasher film or something, they will disorient you by breaking these rules to get you off balance. So you're not quite sure, who is this? What are they doing? Is this the bad guy? Is this the other hero coming to save our principal? What's going on there? All of these things are technique that a good director, good person blocking the scene employs to help tell the story correctly. Next question.
Next question in from Sky Gleason in Seattle, Washington. Can you please discuss DOP versus the camera operator?
Sure. Courtney, you want to take a shot at it first? Then?
Sure. There are different union positions. The director of photography is head of the, in charge of the look of the film, setting the camera angle, in cooperation with the director to some degree, but choosing the lens, setting the camera position, dictating any camera movement that's going to happen during the shot. A lot of times lighting. The director of photography will also have say over the lighting, along with his gaffer, who will be actually performing the electrical manipulation of the lights to the director of photography's request. The camera operator is the person that's actually panning and tilting the camera and carrying out the instructions of the director of photography. Sometimes the director of photography will actually operate the camera. Sometimes they have to obtain a waiver from the union to do that if you're displacing a camera operator. So a lot of times they will have a camera operator, and if you have a DP who likes to operate, that camera operator will be pushed over to B camera or be over at the craft service table a lot. So there are two different distinct positions within the film industry. Sometimes they overlap if you get a director of photography who likes to operate.
Yeah, and I'll just go farther than that. It's one of the most, I think director of photography, DOP, is one of the most misused terms in our industry. And it comes from the fact that cameras are so widely available. In the traditional Hollywood system, everybody knew, and not just Hollywood, but world filming, and everybody knew what the director of photography or the lighting cameraman, that is a supervisory position who is responsible for the aesthetics of each shot in the film as it takes place. And they may or may not be an operator or do that, but it is an aesthetic responsibility. They're supposed to be concentrating on the artistry, not the mechanics of executing each shot. Sadly, with the world of, I got my new Blackmagic camera and I want to get a bunch of my friends together and make a video, people think that means, well, you're directing the photography on your little resume film, so you're a DOP. And it kind of devalues the serious study and time that it takes for a true director of photography to understand so much of the technical parts that are critical to making a film look great. Understanding of the aesthetics of different lenses, understanding all the things we're talking about today in terms of movement and how shots get executed, understanding the interplay of a particular lens array, a particular camera sensor, and the lighting and how it works. All of that is the realm of a serious director of photography who will spend most of their career coming up through the ranks to ascend to that level where they're an expert in all of those areas so they can truly direct all the crews, all the A, B, C units, whoever's out there, second unit, first, second, third units. It's a position that should be highly respected. And I hate seeing sometimes when, the 22 show, I'm the director of photography for this film. Well, maybe you've done most of those things, but you certainly didn't study it all if you're using a single camera with a zoom lens. And if you're putting yourself out as that, I often worry you're going to get in a situation where you're way beyond your understanding. But that's just my feeling about it. Mitchell?
By the way, it's usually referred to as DP.
That's true. DP in America. Yeah. Not director of photography. That's the technical term, but DP is the shorthand. Yes, absolutely. Next question.
Rob Collins in Kansas City, Missouri asks, are there any special terms when a camera is on a mobile platform, such as a drone, RC car, or a crane?
Mitchell.
Always call it camera car. It may also not be, it might be a dolly being pulled by a camera, but always ends up being camera car in my lexicon.
Yeah, and this is also one of those things where I'm not sure that the modern parlance is giving us more trouble, because if you're flying a drone and somebody says truck right to you, is that different than a bank right? Is that I don't know if that language, maybe drone operators who do this a lot, maybe they've come up with a language for that, because there's 6 or 7 different ways to move from right to left in the way that a ground-based system would truck right, that I'm not sure if they all apply to somebody flying.
I think it's fair to say there are different categories of something that's moving.
I think the different operator. And so they may be developing a language for the moves for a flying camera. It would be wise, I think, if they were to, so that we could talk about the same things. But I don't do much of that, so I don't know. Courtney, your thoughts?
Yeah, I hear the term swoop a lot of time mentioned in drone shots.
Yeah.
Swooping in, swooping out.
There
Other
you go.
than that, it's basically, coming in, coming down, camera moves, crane moves. It's like arm down or boom down. Swoop can be used with the effect of a drone. And I'm seeing a lot of these new POV drone shots in a lot of films to get from one location to another location. I think the most recent Bond film used some of those that are quite startling when the camera is just flying at 1,000,000 miles an hour through doorways and down hallways and up and out and over. It's
Yeah, I think we have to thank YouTube for that. I mean, ever since that bowling alley film with the camera literally going behind the pins and in and out of the whole thing, I think a lot of people woke up with some of those things and said, well, we don't have to stick with the shots we've always had traditionally when we were so ground-based. It's very cool. Next question. We're going to try to dive through as many of these as we can in the next 10 minutes.
Sky Gleason, Seattle, Washington. Every industry has its own lexicon. What is the cowboy shot?
I know the martini shot, but I'm not familiar with that. Courtney, anybody else in the thing?
I would hope you would answer this because I think a cowboy is just at the top of the guns, where a cowboy would hold his gun. So it's a waist-high shot just to the top of the hat. That's what I always thought of a cowboy.
I vaguely heard it, but I never really had to execute one, and I never really studied it. So I don't know. It must have its own, there are certain traditions, like the second to last shot of the day being called the martini shot and things like that. Nobody knows where they came from. You just hear those things on set, and what does this crew mean by that? This is not a precise thing. There's all sorts of. If you go online and look for filmmaking jargon, you're going to find 3,500 different sources, and most of it is the same, but not all of it. Let's go to the next one.
Sky Gleason again from Seattle, Washington. Why is wide, medium, close shots used to establish and tell the story through the 2 dimensions of film?
Well, okay. So wide shots, sometimes called establishing shots as well, the function of them is to set the scene. Where are we? So the outside of the bowling alley might be your establishing shot. And then the next shot inside, even if you can't see the lanes, you're just seeing 2 characters talking at a table. The establishing shot, the wide shot, helps orient you as to where you are. Then medium shots tend to be groups talking, 2 people talking, things like that. And these are kind of imprecise, but they generally waist up or something like that, maybe feet up in certain circumstances is a medium shot. Although I've heard people say that anything where you can see a whole figure top to bottom is a wide shot. Close-ups, obviously, you're starting to get to the point where it's head and shoulders up, and an extreme close-up can be that just a shot of someone's eyes or something like that. They're generally pretty fluid terms, and to me, the width of the wide shot determines kind of what is a medium shot and what's a close-up. You can usually tell them by looking at them, but I'm not sure. There's no table of a wide shot is only shows you 6 feet across or something like that. Courtney, your thoughts? Anything more than that?
Yeah, the wide shot, as you said, is to not only establish your position as the camera or as the audience's position, but it establishes all the actors in the scene and where they are relative to each other. Because without knowing that, if you just cut from a close-up to close-up, you'd know that one actor is looking at the other actor, but you don't know where that other actor is, if they're not establishing eye contact with each other. So if one actor is doing something and there's somebody behind him sneaking up on him, you have to cut to a wide shot to see the relationship of that person who's sneaking up behind him to that actor, so that that guy is sneaking up on somebody. He's not in front of him or he's not beside him. He's behind him. So that gives you a real world reference to positions of everybody. And once you establish where everybody is, then you can cut to the close-ups so that the audience isn't confused as to where they are, where the actors are in relationship to each other.
Yeah, hopefully that helps. I think that's a pretty good explanation of why. I will say that, there's a lot of different kinds of camera work. So, a gigantic scenic shot that tries to inform a panorama, it is a wide shot, but it is a very different framing than a wide shot of a stage play where you want to see the entire proscenium arch and where as Courtney was saying, where all the characters are in relation to each other. So they're all fluid like that. Let's go to the next question.
Josh Kaufman, Pittsburgh, PA, asked Shaky Cam, its origin, proper use case, and its misuse.
Take off, Mitchell. Go ahead.
For me, it's my opinion that generally it's not a term of endearment because it means somebody's not doing a very good job of holding a steady shot with a handheld camera. But I can imagine there are some situations where you need to simulate, some kind of severe turbulence or something else, and they would have to shake the camera or bounce it around a little bit to get that effect. It's more of a term that I've seen used more recently than a traditional Hollywood term.
Courtney?
It came into popularity in the late 80s, early 90s, where directors wanted to have something different than the standard two-shot over-the-shoulder, wide shot, cut back and forth to the close-ups. So they went to this handheld stuff, and it gave I worked with so many directors. I want the camera to have more edge to it. I want it edgy. And I was doing a commercial with Vilmos Zsigmond, famous cinematographer. And we were at lunch, and he's going, I had the director the other day said, oh, we don't want to use you. You don't have enough edgy. Edge? I can shake the camera. He was incensed that famous cinematographer used a lot of very big Academy Award winning films, and they wouldn't use him. They passed over him because he wasn't shaking the camera enough, and it can be misused. And it is Friday Night Lights. Look, I couldn't even watch that series because it was all handheld shaky cam.
Yeah,
and they use it to add drama, intensity, edginess, anxiousness to the film of the camera. What I hate is when somebody's talking and the camera will needlessly pan down to their hands or something and back up. Their hands don't have anything to do with it. It's just to keep the frame moving and to add a sequence of immediacy to the shot. It's used to make dramatic scripted films look like documentaries. That's a lot of times they will use shaky cam for that purpose. It's used to give it a documentary feel. So you make it feel more real than actors portraying lines written by somebody.
Yeah, and famously, I think it got a lot of popularity during the Blair Witch Project era because they were trying to tell you that this was a bunch of kids who'd gotten a hold of a camcorder, and the slasher film was all about this is people running around in the forest with a camera and not being good camera people. And in that respect, I will say it worked very effectively because you didn't think this is being done by a crew. You thought you were watching somebody that grabbed a camera and ran through the forest trying to get away from the bad guys. And so it's an aesthetic choice. I'm gonna slip on to the next. We've got 4 or 5. We got 7 more questions, and we're already 4 minutes before the top of the hour. So we're gonna move on. So let's just get to the next one.
Craig McFarlane from Boston, Massachusetts. What are the biggest considerations for live shows when the camera work can't be pre-planned and react to the event?
Mitch?
I only have my own name. I call it Video Cuisinart.
Good camera operators in live events search for things and they look for things. I've done this a couple of times, and one of my finest moments in being a camera operator for the brief time that I did it was I was shooting on stage and there was a piano player there, and I thought, it's so polished and nice. I'm going to kind of go off to this weird thing where I'm seeing the reflection of the piano player, and then there's a lot of negative black space, and screamed into my ear was, "Camera 2, hold that." And I had to sit there on this thing forever. But then he went to a composite of my shot with the reflection of the performer in the camera lid and 2 or 3 other things matted onto it. And it was a beautiful composition. So you just, live show camera work, the people who can think that way are really to be respected. And sometimes you don't want just, close up, medium, and wide shots. Sometimes you're going to try to find that odd angle that they can turn into something special. Mitch, real quick, and Courtney, real quick.
I'll pass to Courtney.
Okay, Courtney.
In my early years as a camera operator, if you have a good director and you're doing television, you can preview a move. I'll show a camera move while I'm not on the air to the director. I'll do it, and he sees it on the monitor that is not on the air. And he'll go, "Oh, And so you do a little job of selling a move to the director, which you can do right before, and he'll see it and say, oh, that's great. Set that shot up and we'll come to you.
Absolutely.
And he'll do that kind of a move.
Yeah, which is nice because it gives, the camera operators and the Steadicam people and everybody else some autonomy to look for things. They're really good at what they do. They know what they can do. Next question.
Stefan Fischer from Würzburg, Germany. Cameras on sliders are common in an interview situation for a shot from the side showing the talent or the interviewer. Is there a use for a slider in a format like Office Hours?
Sometimes slider shots are very interesting because they can reveal that kind of depth perspective. I'm surprised that sometimes even a 3-foot or a 4-foot slider, if you can set it up so that there's something in the foreground and then something at distance, you get that kind of parallax of things moving that can make for a very interesting shot. So I find sliders to be useful tools when you can. Mitchell, your thoughts?
Yeah, I would use it as an establishing shot to establish the perspective. But in this program, I don't think it has a place for it.
Yeah, no, we're trying to do something else. And in fact, the back end guys needing us to be in the center so they can do their compositing is probably a whole different thing. Next question.
David Brady, New York City. And my favorite shot ever starts as a crane and then straight into a handheld. Here I go. Shohei Imamuras pigs and battleships at about 8:48 on the timeline.
There's some famous shots about literally composite shots that go through a variety. Probably one of the most famous is in Orson Welles' Touch of Evil. The entire opening shot is about 5 minutes long, and it is brilliant, and it starts medium, and it goes flying over buildings, and it eventually ends up at the main couple at the border, all done as one thing, shot long overnight. Good directors who have a vision and have the clout to take the time to execute these things. There's another one, Goodfellas and other. Courtney, your thoughts?
Yeah, we talked about it earlier. The Bound for Glory shot where he steps off the crane, Garrett Brown does, with a Steadicam and then walks into the crowd and into a close-up all in one shot is pretty amazing.
Yeah, nice stuff. Next question.
Rob Collins in Kansas City, Missouri asked, how would one move with a 360 camera? What things should be kept in mind while doing it?
360 camera. Well, that's tough. And I think we should wait until Alex gets back. Courtney will have some thoughts on this, but Alex, actually, I was just trying to get rid of the tripod under the thing. It's hard to set up lighting and other things when you're doing 360. Courtney, your thoughts?
Yeah, you got to mount the camera on top of your head. That's the only way to do it, to stay out of the shot if you're moving the camera. And it's not a good idea to move a camera, a 360 camera, because it disorients everybody because you're moving and you don't know which direction people are going to be looking.
Yep. Next question.
Hashid Trivedi in Daytona Beach, Florida, and right here on our panel. Can you remind me what the term crossing the line means? Please.
Sure. The easiest way to understand it is think that you're watching a stage play, right? And so if your camera's in the audience and an actor on the stage you're watching this, moves from your center to the right side from your perspective. If you were to imagine yourself walking behind them, that same actor is moving from the center to the left. And so the line is a line in front of the camera where if you move the camera past that line, directionality reverses. So it can disorient the audience because, they're tap dancing in a line to the right and you cut to the camera upstage behind them and they're suddenly tap dancing to the left. All directions change when you cross the line. So that's what we're talking about with that. Next question.
And it's my question, and I like this one. What was the classic camera move and fight scenes in the original Batman TV series?
Pow! Mitchell, what was it?
It was, I'll let Courtney answer because it's much, much more authentic coming from him.
It was the snap zoom.
Yeah.
That was one of them.
Yeah,
also the Dutch angle.
Well, Dutch was true too. They would tilt the camera at a Dutch angle, and then they do a snap zoom a lot of times.
And I'll give you a hint about snap zooms. It's sometimes called explosion zooms. You've probably seen this a lot, but if you execute it in the camera, so you've got a medium or a wide shot, and you flip the zoom lever so that all of a sudden you go from wide to very tight, very fast. If you play that back in slow motion, you get a really trippy, zoomy, time tunnel kind of effect that is just really fun to watch. Okay, we got to the end. Thank you all for bearing with us as we've gone through that. Thank you for all the excellent questions. I really appreciate you taking the time to do that. I'm looking over here, and I was so involved in the question answering that I'm not sure that I got everything that I need to say for tomorrow's shows. Let's see, that's already taken care of. On Friday, Ruthless Reviews. So this time behind the scenes. So if you're interested as viewers of Office Hours to see what our camera setups look like, we are going to try to turn the cameras around on ourselves and our circumstances, and at least some of us will probably be brave enough to show you what happens behind the scenes for our rigs. Saturday, we're talking about immersive media. Sunday, as always, introspection days. Let's see. Tomorrow, this will be tomorrow. So Conversation with Tony Movies last night. Isadora with Elle right after the show today. So tune in for that. Burning with Lois also happening. So check that out on the Burning with Lois website. Friday, they're talking about that's today, the Friday Tech Tackle. So I was wrong. Right after this, 9:15 a.m., the Friday Tech Tackle. So stick around on after hours for that. Thank you. All the panelists today, thank you for their help in getting this show done. The producers, everybody who watched, and thought we were going to be short today, and you guys have come through as always. So all men, women, boys, girls, everything else, thank you for being here. Thank you for putting in your questions. Watch the credits at the end because those people all work really hard behind the scenes. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you tomorrow.
As the camera does a Mickey Rooney, yeah, to a Dutch angle.
I remember buying 2 tripod heads to try to play with Dutch angles, and it's not fun to try to handle 2 offset. And for those of you who didn't know, a Dutch angle is when you tilt the camera rather than on a horizon, like mess with the horizon.
You need a special head for that.
Well, you can buy 2 regular heads and just mount them at 90-degree angles. But it makes a very top-heavy, hard-to-wield rig.
T2.
I had a director used to use the Duke mount, which is they set the football on top of the camera head and then the camera on top of the football. That way they could go any direction. The Duke mount. It was a Duke football.
The Duke